So welcome back to my channel. This is Gamer Dom, and yeah, it's been a while since I did any kind of update video on World of Tanks, and that's largely because I kind of went through a very big dip in interest in the game, and then I was travelling for business and then travelling for holiday. So that's kind of the reason why. But while I was away, I had internet and didn't play games because you need to break. Take some breaks, guys. Don't play constantly. You will burn yourself out. I got a chance to catch up on a few of the developments in the game and what was happening, and because I kind of lost touch really with what was going on. And the one that's really catching my eye and causing me a little bit of concern, but I'm not really sure whether it's right or not, and I'd be love to hear what you guys have to say about it, is the super test changes to preferential matchmaking. So, rewind for those of you who haven't been around that long or don't know what was going on. Preferential matchmakings were the premium tanks of choice originally in the game. It basically means you will never see tier 10s in your tier 8s premiums. You would see only tier 9s, and they were kind of set up to be slightly worse than the average tier 8. So they were like 7.5s, if that makes sense, that sort of thing. And they made up for it because although they weren't as good as a regular tier 8, and they certainly weren't good enough to go up against tier 10s, they generated extra credits, extra crew experience, etc, 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 and they were fun to play. Now, when Wargaming in their infinite wisdom decided to buff every heavy tank, every tier 8 tank in the game, these tier 8 preferential matchmaking tanks became pretty much obsolete overnight. They just can't compete with the likes of a Defender or one of the other tier 8s that are in the game now. They just don't have the armor, they don't have the gun power. And then Wargaming, in another stupid move, decided to amend the matchmaking. So there's this nirvana now of matchmaking, which is 3, 5, 7. So 3 top tiers, 5 middle tiers, and 7 bottom tiers. That's what they're aiming for in every game that they start. When you hit that battle game, that's what that battle button. That's what they're trying to achieve. So they changed it, and what that effectively means, and I'm not going to go back over this because there's been enough videos talking about this for time immemorial since this introduction was happened. But the upshot of it was, when you play your tier 8s, you very, very rarely get top tier. It's so rare. It's noticeable how rare it is. And given the fact these preferential matchmaking tanks can't really compete, they tended to find themselves in battles where it was all tier 8s, or the majority of the tanks were tier 8s and tier 9s, and they're just not good enough. And so people stopped playing them, and people were moaning because they've spent real money on these tanks. At the same time, Wargaming came out with this cock and bull story about how preferential matchmaking was screwing up the matchmaking system, and they wanted to bring back or change them all to be +2 matchmaking. So they would buff them all so they're like every other tier 8 and they can see tier 10s. Now, this caused a huge amount of anger, and sort of people very, very unhappy with this kind of idea, myself included. I bought these tanks because I wanted to play tier 9 maximum. I wanted to have those games which I loved back in the day, where the KV5s and you came trundling down and everything was pinging off you, and eventually you got taken down, but it was fun doing it. Now you just walk out, you get hit by about 3 shells and you're dead. Anyway, so Wargaming for once listened. They tend to I've noticed they listen to things if it's about money. So people were very unhappy about the money they spent in the game, and of course there's legal implications. You buy it, you're buying up goods. You're buying goods that then they're amending by changing its characteristics. Now, so they went back to the drawing boards and came back with another idea and said, look, if we slightly buff all the tier 8 preferential matchmaking tanks, so that they're competitive in tier 8s and tier 9s, how do you guys feel about that? And everyone went, yeah, that's pretty good. Because it is. However, the thing that worries me most is, now are they creating a monster of a tier 8 premium tank? The reason why I say that is these tanks are only just slightly off the pace, and then you start buffing them to a point where they're competitive with tier 8s and tier 9s, do they become almost impossible to be dealt with by tier 6s. Tier 6s who can face tier 8s, tier 7s who can face tier 8s, how are they going to cope with even more high-level tier 8 tanks, really good tier 8 tanks like these guys? If you add these preferential matchmaking tanks into the pile with all the other preferential, or with all the other regular tier 8 premium tanks, you might. Do you just give up when you're in a tier 6 tank and you click that button and you get in a tier 8 game? Because you've got no chance of penning these things. So it worries me a little bit with it, but at the same token, something needs to be done. And this is all. I was talking with Shoot the other night about this, and he was saying, well, it's all Wargaming's own doing, and it is. It's completely their own doing. They've constantly buffed all these extra tanks up to these newer tanks coming in are better and better every time. The next one is better than the previous one, better gun handling, better armor, blah blah blah. At the same time, it seems to be the norm now just to hit the 2 button and fire just premium rounds all the time. So the kind of the world that these preferential matchmaking tanks were brought into were originally developed for doesn't exist. And I'm worrying that they're creating real monsters for the rest of us to deal with. Let's have a look at some of the stats. Now, bear in mind, all these things are subject to change. It's not final. They're going through super testing. In fact, this is the second lot of amendments, I believe, to these tanks. T26E4 Super Pershing, the American tier 8 medium come heavy tank. Now, this one to me, I was one of the few competitive tier 8 preferential matchmaking tanks in the game. It's quite a good heavy Freudian slip, medium stroke heavy. I play it still fairly regularly. I quite like it. It's very, very slow, but the gun is competitive. The armor is competitive because a lot of it's spaced armor. When people are hitting their 2 key and getting a lot of heat fired at you, heat's not so effective against spaced armor, and the Super Pershing can survive quite well, but they're going to buff it all the same. So the first thing they're looking at with the Super Pershing is to increase its engine power up by 2. So it was 10, now it's 12. And that's kind of interesting because this thing, one of the things that held it back was its speed. That's pretty good. That helps a lot. Extra 50 hit points per minute, damage per minute, so 1,800, which is also welcome, which means its reload time must have gone up, and most importantly, its penetration's gone up by 10 millimeters, so 202 millimeters with its standard pen shell, which basically is enough to go through everything that it's going to face of lower tier, and makes it able to deal quite handily with anything its own tier. So yeah, unnecessary change, I would suggest, but welcome to the Super Pershing drivers out there. So the Type 59, the Chinese tier 8 medium tank, that was the rarest of the rare, the one everybody wanted. We all clamoured for it, we all fought for it, we all debased ourselves for it, and then Wargaming went, don't worry boys, just buy it with a gambling box in the shop at Christmas. And yeah, so now they're common as muck, they're everywhere, and it's debased the whole Type 59. Not that I'm bitter, I won mine fair and square on a Quickie Babe stream, I believe, if I remember rightly. Anyway, neither here nor there. That's my sour face. Aim time increase, so it's got better aim time now of 2 seconds. Engine power went up as well, which means its power ratio is now 18.1, up 3.66, which is a fairly significant increase. It means it's up there with the more nimble medium tanks that are in the game. Damage per minute up by 50, 1,775. Dispersion on hull traverse better as well, 0.1 rather down 0.02. So again, nice little changes to that tank. It's already had some buffs. It had armor changes some time ago, and it's I didn't think it was a bad medium tank now, but those things are going to make it even better. IS-6, now this is one of the big ones. We'll look at the armors on this later, but yeah, the IS-6, the Tier 8 Russian heavy tanks, you know what's coming. They're going to buff this one within an inch of its life, aren't they? Standard shell penetration up to 182 millimeters, plus 7 millimeters, which, again, doesn't really make any sense. So, Super Pershing, it's got 90 millimeter gun, 202 penetration. IS-6, 122 millimeter gun, 182 millimeters. Doesn't make much sense to me, but hey, whatever. I know it's got bigger alpha and probably the shell velocity is lower, but whatever. It just seems crazy, really. Aim time improved as well, down to 2.8 seconds, which is actually very good for a heavy tank. Dispersion at 100 meters, 0.44, down slightly. And the ammunition, so it's got extra ammunition for its gun, 37 shells, which is welcome, because I think it's one of those tanks that did sometimes run out of shells when you got it out in a favourable matchup. 112, which is the Chinese preferential Tier 8 heavy, renowned for very, very good armour, but an absolutely shocking gun. And they're doing something about that gun increase. Same in line with the IS-6, penetration up to 182, damage per minute up to 1,850, dispersion 0.44, slightly improved. Aim time is now 3, which is also improved, and heat shell speed has gone up to 720, up 80 meters per second. Yeah. And of course everyone fires heat, so that will be very welcome to the spammers out there. WZ11111111, Chinese, the other Chinese Tier 8 heavy tank. I preferred this one to the 112 myself. This is also the Alpine Tiger. I believe it has exactly the same stats, so I'm assuming that any buff to the WZ will also affect the Alpine. Hope so, because I swapped my WZ for the Alpine when it was available just recently, because it looked prettier. There, I said it. So again, same penetration, 182 millimeters of pen. Heat speed again up to 72, same as the 1112. That's it. Dispersion up to 0.42, better than the 112 and better than the IS-6, which is one of the things the WZ is very nice for, is that gun handling slightly better than both of those at the moment. An aim time of 2.8, which is also improved. So again, very nice indeed. The Mutant, the other tank, the tank they said would never be sold. This was a tank that was given out to super testers, or no, early backers of the game. So anybody who started and bought I guess it was sort of a founder's pack or something like that, put money into the game before it was really famous and big. They were given this tank, the Mutant, in exchange for that, and it was said, this will be exclusive to you guys. Roll on about 7 years later, and Wargame went, oh, how can we make more money? And let's sell it. So they sold it. It's been sold twice now, I believe. And they are doing, I mean, I don't think it was worth buying, but now I'm looking at it and thinking, bloody hell, that's a seriously good tank now. So that's a Tier 8 American. Is it medium or heavy? I think it's medium. Anyway, I don't know. Doesn't matter. But look at the standard penetration, 204. Wow. That's monumental. Reverse speed has gone up by 4, so 14 kilometers per second, meters per hour. Traverse speed has gone to 28 degrees per second, up 4 degrees per second. Dispersion on hull traverse has increased, has got better, 0.16. So very, very nice indeed. There's also been, again, significant buffs to the armour. We'll take a look at that in a minute. T-34-3, one of the god-awful medium tanks, Chinese Tier 8 medium tank. Personally, I hated this thing. Gun handling was shocking. It had 0 gun depression, and just the aim time was so long. The reload time was so long, it was just nothing nice about it. I know some people love it, but personally I hated it. Now they buffed it again a while back, improved its gun depression, I believe. I think they also improved some of its armour, but they're going to go further. So standard shell penetration up to 182, seems to be a standard number now, minimum of 182 for a Tier 8 gun. Heat shell goes up to 720, same as the other guys. Dispersion now 0.44. Slight improvement. Gun depression angle changes to -6, so -6.5. So that's a significant increase. Look at that, 1.5 increase. Very, very good. Dispersion during movement 0.16, and dispersion on traverse of the hull 0.16. So again, some significant buffing. The Big Daddy, the KV-5, the Russian Tier 8 heavy tank, one of the tanks I used to love playing and barely ever touch anymore. One of the ones they were first using as the model for improvements on this thing. Standard shell up to 182, and it's got a very fast rate of fire, so that's significant. Aim time also improved by 0.6, so very good. So 2.3 now. Reverse speed increases by 3. Dispersion at 100 meters, 0.4. Also very good. This thing is getting to be a quite nice tank. Radio operator R2D2 basically improved by 20 millimeters. Always one of the weak spots of this thing. The 88 Jag Tiger, one of, I think it was the first Tier 8 premium tank I bought. And one of the tanks I've played most in the game still. I haven't played it for a long time because it's shite. But it's not so bad anymore. Look at that penetration, 212 penetration, up by 9 millimeters. Very nice indeed. Aim time down to 1.8. This thing's going to be a sniping boss. Hit points 1,500, up a full 200. That's pretty much an extra shot it can take before it dies, pretty much. Traverse speed, 32 degrees per second. Reverse goes up by 4 to 16, so it'll pull back much easier. So these are significant changes on the whole. Let's look at some of the armour. This is the IS-6. I mean, before this section, the cheeks here were fairly weak, 177, and now they're 224, sorry, and this side 197. Now bear in mind something like a T150, which this thing could work, well, it's more than likely to come up against, has what, 170 penetration, something like that. Means before it could pen it, now it can't. Now it can't. This driver's hatch here in the middle, 257, now 281. These cheek things here, up to 377. I mean, I'm impenetrable. This thing, I mean, these are all effective armor values, you can see, and as I say, subject to change. This isn't final, but some of this armor profile around here, this thing is going to be an absolute beast of a heavy tank again. Now, it doesn't escape the fact that you come up against other tier 8s and tier 9s and they're just firing gold at you all the time, and they'll go through it like a knife through butter. But again, my point is, fighting tier 6s and tier 7s, they're going to struggle with this thing. And yeah, I know they can flank them, and that's what, you shouldn't really go head to toe with a tank that you can't deal with, but it's not always easy to flank. And also, remember, if you're in a tier 6 heavy tank, this thing is probably more mobile than you are. So good luck flanking it. This is the KV-5. Again, lots of buffing of armor values, again, which is probably needed. I mean, the R2D2 here on the front was always its weak spot, 150 and 140 values, now up to 170 and 160. So if you come up against this, fire at the lower bit. 160, fairly decent actually. The rest of the armor is very, very good indeed. The commander's hatch, 150 to 190. These bits around the gun here, 196. Again, enough to push it out of the range of a tier 6 tank to pen this, even when it's firing gold. So it's fairly significant changes again. The mutant, I mean, look at this thing. I mean, all this frontal armor is just almost impregnable. The lower plate is very weak, but this section at the top was always very much something you could aim for. 147, now 228. Good luck penning that. The commander's hatch, very small target, but now it's 156. So again, very tasty. Super Pershing improved the commander's hatch here, the section on above the gun, up to 131. The cheeks here, 177. I think these bits here are spaced, so you've got to hit above or below those to get the benefit of that, because this extra spaced armor from this right shield here will seriously hamper your chances of penning. So again, improved armor. That's back to the R6. So yeah, That's what they're looking at the moment. There are, I mean, it's all up in the air, so we will see what happens in terms of the final product. But it does worry me a lot how much these tanks are, they're so obsessed with dealing with their problem of their own making around matchmaking, and the fact that tier 8s always see a tier 9s and 10s, that they're so obsessed with dealing with that they've lost sight of the fact these things will also find tier 6s and tier 7s. Now you can argue what chance does a tier 6 have against um, a, a defender, for instance, and the answer is pretty limited. So on the occasions where does it make any difference having a Super Pershing or a IS-6 that's similar? Well, it kind of does, because at the moment you're only facing one or two of those really super obese or super OP tier 8 tanks. So if you add in all these preferential matchmaking tanks as well, and they're in the same kind of category, suddenly these tier 6s are going to be facing things, tier 8s, all the time that they can't deal with. Yeah, that just worries me a bit. And I say, this is Wargaming's own fault. The constant power creep of their tanks that they bring in, each one just have been better and better and better than the previous, and then they look back and go, okay, this thing needs buffing, this thing needs buffing, this thing, and then you go, well, what about the other tier tanks it has to face? The answer? Just give us front lines. If you give us front lines, then nobody plays anything other than their own tier, and everything's good with the world. Anyway, I thought you'd be interested. I certainly was. I think there's still work to be done on these matchmaking tanks, preferential matchmaking tanks, but you can see the way they're going, and that's basically to soup these things up. Even though they will still never see tier 10s, they'll only ever see tier 9s as a maximum. But have they gone too far? Let me know. Let me know in the comments down below. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. In the meantime, enjoy your games, have fun, try not to take it too seriously, and I'll see you again soon. This is GamerDom signing out.